without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce George. I actually don't know your last name.
Ryan.
Ryan. Okay, and he's with Hope for Wildlife. And last winter, I was at the Eagle Watch at the Sheffield Mills Community Center, where they have the pancake breakfast, etc. From the BNS, we always have a little stand up there. And George was there with advertising Hope for Wildlife. And since I'm always trying to figure out how am I going to get people to give presentations, I asked George, and he was more than delighted to come and give a presentation. Now, when he was at the community center, he had a barred owl with him, a live one, not a dead one, that he carried around in his mind the whole time. And I thought, maybe he's going to bring it tonight. But it is, yeah, it's a long drive to get here. And the owl said, no, I want to sleep. I know I'm a night owl, but today I want to sleep. So it's back in darkness. Anyways, so without further ado, please welcome George, who's going to talk about Hope for Wildlife.
Hello. Hello, thank you. Common Naturalist Society. Thanks for inviting us and to talk. I am very delighted. I'm very excited to be here. I have a habit of walking around and talking. I'm kind of animated, so I'll do my best not to stand in front of the projector. If I do, just somebody yell at me and tell me to go out of the way. Okay. Feel free to ask questions. You don't need to save it all to the end. Get some time at the end for maybe the people online that I know are watching to ask some questions. But I'm going to go through pretty quickly everything that Hope for Wildlife does, because it's quite a lot. But I thought I'd give you guys an idea of what we do, if you're not familiar with what we do, and maybe where we are right now, how we do what we do. So just as an aside, all the photographs of the animals are actual patients of ours. They're no stock photographs. So this actually was a bobcat patient of ours. Let's I click this. Oh, too many clicks. All right, so let's start with the basics. We do have a mission statement at Hope for Wildlife. How many people know what we do? You guys are all familiar with wildlife people, of course. You just never know. I'm super excited because a lot of times it's young kids that I go and talk to, seeing everybody with the same hair colors.
So I'm going to follow the.
We do have a mission statement. I don't know if people still do that. It always seems kind of 80s to me, but we do have a mission statement. You're going to notice that the key part of it really is bringing wildlife and people together. So our real mission isn't just rescuing and rehabilitating, releasing injured northern wildlife, but it's really helping people form a relationship with wildlife again. So part of our idea with how to help conservation in a number of ways, but the key way is if people understand how great wildlife is, that they're sentient, feeling creatures, that they have places in the environment, and that their difficulties trying to coexist with us lead to them being injured and orphaned a lot, that the problem becomes easier to solve if we can bring the animals to people, people to animals, instead of people just doing what we do mostly now, not this crowd, not this, but living in an artificial world and then going and visiting the real one on the weekends or something, and then when it starts to get dark, get scared and then leave and come back. So we're trying to rectify some of that. Here. So the three main pillars that we have is obviously the rehabilitation side. The second one is education. That's what I'm doing right now. So we do go to schools and workplaces and conferences and talks. And then research. So there is a needs research component to what we do. Nowhere near as big as we like, but that does exist.
I know.
So what's wildlife rehabilitation, this crazy thing that we do? If you read this, the most important part you're going to see is the last sentence there, I guess the last line. Our goal is to get them back out into the environment. So we're not a zoo, not a sanctuary, even though we do have some education. we do get permits to talk about. Our goal is to put everything back. I mean, every single animal is valuable to its environment. Even if it's a mouse, it's valuable to its environment. So our goal is to heal an animal, get it to the state where it is healthy enough and capable of going to the wild, and then releasing it. It takes actually quite a lot to do what we do. You'd be surprised how many disciplines are in there. Not only just the veterinary part, but understanding the animal's natural history, understanding what its food needs is, what its biological needs is, what its behavior is. There's fundraising, zoology. Somebody's got to build all the enclosures, and we have to know how to build them and what the proper materials are and stuff. There's actually quite a lot that goes into this, much more than I ever thought when I started ages ago. So let's talk about why the animals come to us. This is a Blandings turtle, by the way. It's the only Blandings turtle we've ever had in 28 years of being in operation. And we actually did heal it up from being hit by a car and got to send it home. So we're pretty excited about that since it's super endangered.
Pretty rare.
So for all rehabs worldwide, the average intake that you're going to see, the reason that the animals come to us, 97% of them come through anthropogenic causes. So basically, some direct or indirect human interference cause, like they get hit by a car or whatever. We're going to look at some of those. That's the vast majority. There is another 3% that's not bad. That's kind of swapping the equation, but for the most part, it's all us. What we see is almost entirely us. So I've lumped them into a few categories. You could go down a rabbit hole with categories here, but I've lumped them into a few to make it sort of easy to talk about. And I thought I would just sort of run through the common stuff that we see. So the first one is vehicle collisions, which is a huge amount of our intake. Everybody that's driven a car lately has seen animals all on the side of the road. So that is actually a very large amount of intake for any rehab anywhere. This is a barred owl that was hit by a car. Those there are pins in the upper and lower mandible because it struck him in the face and it fractured both his upper and lower mandible. So we have them pinned in place to help them regrow. Animals that we get, birds, mammals, reptiles, everything gets hit by cars. Various reasons for different reasons. And barred owls here, for example, they like to hunt. They're really, really active hunting at dusk. They wake up, they start hunting at dusk. We will get about 85% of our barred owls. There's about 100 barred owls a year that we get. We're going to get 85% of them, say 85, in the 2-month period starting now, probably leading into February. And that is because in summertime, dusk is 9:30. And if dusk, what time is dusk right now? You're getting rush hour traffic dusk time. So when they're finding food on the sides of the roads, because these are a perch and pounce bird, and they like a lot of open area to go over. They're not super aerodynamic because of the softness of their feathers. They like an open area to hunt over. They will get them all when our activity and their activity sort of overlap in an unfortunate way. You see the data happen in real time. It sort of slopes up and then it peaks somewhere around in the middle of January and then starts to slope off again. So every animal that we have has that kind of story. So vehicle collisions are one. So stuff hitting animals is one category, animals hitting things is another. And the most common one we have for that is window strikes for birds. Upper bound estimate in Canada for birds killed by window strikes here is like 35 million. The United States estimates it's in like up to 1 billion. I don't know how statistically likely that high end is, but even if it's 20 million, that's a lot of birds. And those are the ones that we can confirm. So some of the new studies coming out are telling us that birds that hit windows and then sort of sit on the ground. But we used to think years ago, maybe be stunned, give them 45 minutes in a box, see if they recover a little bit, and if they fly away, we assumed they were fine. It turns out that about 50 to 60% of all of those animals don't survive because they have some kind of trauma that doesn't prevent them from flying away, but they sort of succumb to the injuries later. So that about 6 or 7 years ago prompted us to change our procedures and policies around that entirely. So we bring every window strike bird in and we give it preventative care, anti-seizure medication, anti-inflammatories, and we put them under 48-hour observation just to be sure. So we're always kind of feeding off that. So window strikes are big. This is cardinal. If I remember correctly, That is probably a cord break. So there's a bone here that attaches to the shoulder girdle that helps stabilize it from the sternum. That very commonly breaks on a bird that hits the window. The other ones will be wing breaks, you know, sometimes a leg break, but that's pretty common. And it's all types of birds. I think there's never been a bird. I don't know if we've ever had a turkey vulture that hit a window. They wouldn't be surprised. I hope there should no. In 1999, we had one. Cat and dog bites. Cat's by far the worst.
Yeah.
Cat and dog bites are actually 20% of our intake.
Wow.
They actually really do a lot of damage on the environment. A lot of people are happy to hear that, but a significant portion of what we bring in is cat bites. And that's mammals as well as birds. They're actually, their mouths, particularly cats, carry a lot of bacteria. So even just the slightest scratch, a pinprick that's almost invisible to our eyes is enough to kill a small bird like this. So again, if we even suspect that the animal has been in a pet's mouth, we'll bring it in and give a prophylactic treatment. We don't play games with that. It's too risky. So if they said no, it's fine, I can't see anything wrong with it, we just go get it. We didn't bring it in almost all of the time. So that's a significant. And when you see the numbers on the intake, you're going to realize how big of a problem that is. Can't see on a keyword here, but go the wrong way. Category I'm going to call entrapment, which is what I'm going to classify as animals getting stuck inside places where they're not supposed to be. This is by far the most common form of entrapment we have in Nova Scotia. It is raccoons, often gulls too, stuck in green bins. This is a fatal occurrence. Doesn't matter whether it's summer, doesn't matter whether it's winter, they get in, they can't get out, they're going to succumb to the elements one way or the other. And it can be very, very deceptive because on an unsecured green bin, the garbage could be a foot from the top. Now it's been out in the heat of the summer for a week, there's all kinds of slurry in there, all that decomposing food in there starts to off gas. It actually starts to ferment. They get in, start eating, breathe in all of those fumes, they get disoriented and drunk basically almost immediately, and they won't even know to leave. So it isn't necessarily even a matter of it's only that far out. It's just it's like you drinking a 40 of vodka and then you get out the green bin. And so that's hard. This one in particular is in this slurry. He did rub most of his skin off his paws trying to get out before he was found. So it's pretty hard on animals getting stuck and stuff. Now it's not just green bins, it's window wells, it's being shut inside of sheds, it's stuck in a camper, holed up in an attic because somebody finished building a house. So all kinds of ways that animals get stuck places they're not supposed to get stuck in. So that's super common. Entanglement is kind of the sister to entrapment. It is animals getting stuff stuck around them. Ingestion I might throw in here as well. Oh, that's probably more garbage. You might think it's kind of, hyperbole where we used to see the old PSAs when I was a kid. We cut the rings off all things so the dolphins don't get them around their neck. This is actually a super common occurrence. Animals with stuff stuck around their neck all the time. And it could be garden netting here that this guy got his neck stuck in. He was able to chew his way out, but he didn't get the stuff off his neck. Rings from things. We've had oil filter rings. You'd be surprised what we have animals come in with stuff around their neck. Jars on heads is surprisingly common. And it doesn't cans on heads. Any can or jar that isn't crushed or sealed, some animals getting on its head somewhere. Bird feeders stuck on heads. You'd be surprised. Garden netting gets entwined easily. So if you're using like basically the cheap kind of garden netting that's kind of the wide stuff, birds will get stuck in that super, super easy. Soccer nets, hockey nets, hammocks. I'd have died for every time I saw a picture come in of a male deer with his antlers tangled in a hammock. You'd be surprised. It's actually very, very common. So that's a whole other way that they can get entangled. So basically anything outside that they can get twisted in that's not part of their natural environment, they can get stuck in. Lots of people like to put out dryer lint and hair for birds to make nests out of. You guys all probably know we do that. We see why. that hair is fine enough to get around a hummingbird's legs and just cut off its circulation pretty easy. So there's all kinds of, you'd be surprised at all the things that we see. So entanglement is also a big category. Garbage is kind of like entanglement, but generally it means they're probably eating it. This is a fledgling robin that decided this piece of string looked maybe like a worm, and who knows. It ended up all in its intestines. I mean, it was all inside. That was just the end of what was much, much, much longer. So any piece of discarded litter or garbage that's out in the wild, some animal is going to try to eat it. They're going to get entangled in it sometimes. And that also includes unsecured garbage. You've got food that's toxic, toxic to dogs. So you put out a bunch of stuff in your compost, somebody gets in a green bin and eats it, and it's not healthy for them. It's dangerous for them. Fish hooks, that fish breaks the line, takes the hook along with it, then a herring eats it, ends up with the lead weight and the hook stuck in its stomach. That's all part of garbage. And these are the major categories. Poisoning intoxicants, not super common, but common enough that I listed it on here. Lead poisoning is an issue, especially with birds of prey. 50% of all the bald eagles in the United States have some chronic level of lead in their system all the time. It's super common. Rodenticide is also a big problem. So people putting out rat poison. At some point, I've read a study that has pretty much covered almost every animal in the United States that's been detected with rodenticide in the system, including bobcats and bears, cougars in California. It's a huge problem because you're putting poison out in the environment. The toxicant, the anticoagulant usually is what they're using, doesn't kill the rodent right away. Usually takes a bunch of doses over time. In that time, it's getting sicker, it's getting weaker, it's moving slower. That means it's easier prey. So you're kind of bringing a bunch of animals to like a restaurant or something like that, which is an artificial watering hole. Then you've got some birds of prey up there that figure out they're there because they can see the urine trails. And then you're feeding them all the slowest animals, which are all poisoned. There was a big study done on 3 rehabs in the northwestern United States where they tested every single red-tailed hawk that came in for 2 years, and every single one of them had rodenticide in the system. So that's another huge problem. Environmental, not really what we're going to say directly human cause, although we can slide climate change in there if we want to a little bit in some cases. But a large portion of what we will see this time of year is the birds that come in from hurricanes that get stranded on land, that injure themselves trying to get off from land. It's not uncommon if we have a hurricane for us to get 70 birds the next day. It's pretty awesome. So dovekies, storm petrels, that sort of thing. The wildfires are some animals as well. Oiling is one that's also more common than you might think. Most of the time when I talk about oiling, people think, oil pipelines leaking in the forest or Exxon Valdez or something. A lot of what we see is just cooking oil. This is a seagull in cooking oil. Unsecured cooking oil from a restaurant somewhere. He got in. This is what he ended up looking like. Is actually more common than you think. And there's a lot more sort of serendipitously discarded motor oil in ditches than you would think. It still does happen. So that's actually a nice category to have. And then, I don't know if did I skip one? Okay. I'm going to skip human interference, which is my polite way of saying it. Not everyone likes animals. Maybe we'll put it that way. This is a pigeon that ran afoul of somebody who was obviously doing work on a house and spray foamed him. And we will see everything, animals that have been shot with arrows, obviously poisoning, direct poisoning is one, and then every other pretty much cruel thing you can think that do to animals we've probably seen at some point or other. But it does happen, particularly the animals that are quote-unquote nuisance animals tend to get picked on a lot. Habitat destruction does send some animals our way. In particular, in this province, the biggest one we get is turtles. Our turtle species are at risk, mostly because we're removing their ability to either have or get to their nesting areas. So they're crossing more and more roads to get where they need to be. I'm going to go out on a limb here, because Hope's not here, and say that I don't remember us ever getting a turtle in that wasn't hit by a car. I think almost all of our, if I went and said 9, I'd probably, this is a snapping turtle that we had a couple of years ago that was hit by a car. And here's the funny thing, it doesn't look like he has a scratch on him. Snapping turtles don't tend to get run over as much because they're big enough to see from a distance. The smaller ones, when you get the wood turtle or something like that, they're harder to see. But they tend to get a tire on either side of them. But snapping turtles snap. And so almost always what happens is they bite the undercarriage of the car as it's going over, and it's like a broken jaw. That's extraordinarily common. And the last category, I know I feel bad. I'm always like, an upbeat story. Don't worry. There's good news coming, people. Electrocution. Probably not our most common one, but I put it up there because on certain species, like birds of prey, it is more common. They're big enough to get one foot on the negative and one foot on the positive per ground, so to speak. It's just because red-tailed hawk that came out with electrocution burns on his legs. Ospreys get electrocuted a lot. And birds that build their nest right like on the power line, so they're like right there next to it. Sooner or later, the luck runs out and they put one foot on one side, put one foot on the other. So that's what also happens quite a bit.
Eagles certainly around here.
Eagles as well. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff I read a while ago that I've always meant to go back to, but the United States, whatever Department of the Interior, whatever they call it now, they have a huge program where they're trying to redesign all the power lines so that the distance between the wires is more than, I think, 60 inches, which is like the widest span for any bird of prey that they have. Just trying to prevent this problem, because I guess it's a huge problem, because obviously they've got 50 times the amount of power lines that we do probably. So the final category we get is orphanage. So all the other ways that I just talked about, including a bunch that I didn't, also can result in animals being orphaned. Orphanage is probably half of what we bring in, maybe a little less than 40%. Of all the species you can particularly imagine. Obviously, mom hit by car. Construction, so if somebody's building 5 houses in a subdivision and they disturb a fox den somewhere, sometimes you can work with like local builders to let them mom find a new den, and then she will move them on a night if you allow it. It might take a week, it might take a bit longer than that. And we have had companies that are more than willing to do that. If you get one of those giant companies that are building like 400 houses in the next 2 years, they tend to have a schedule and they just blow through it. Landscaping also does a lot of disturbance of animals. Domestic pets. So even if your domestic pet doesn't harm mom, but your cat brings home a squirrel, I have no idea how far that your cat brought that squirrel. Like, was it your yard, 5 yards down the road, a kilometer away? It's pretty hard to find mom again when you don't really know where mom is. Human interference, which is, I just don't like this animal in my backyard, so come and get it or else. That does happen sometimes. And kidnapping, it's what we call, you find hares, seals, fawns, which are the species of animals where mom doesn't stay with them all day. Mother deers only come in a couple times a day to feed, and then she leaves them alone for the first 3 or 4 weeks of life, maybe 5 even. And so people find these animals and assume that the natural world works like we do. It's like, where's mom? Mom's gone. And then they pick it up, they drive it to us, and then we put it back in the car and drive it back. So because that's just not how everything works. Hares we get a lot because mom will leave them alone all day, and she splits them up. Right? They don't stay together. She hides them. That way, if one gets discovered, they all don't get eaten. But they don't tend to move around much, but it's pretty common to see like one hare all by himself, this little bitty tiny, adorable little baby hare just waiting for mom to come back. And somebody scoops it up and assumes that. So sometimes you can bring them back and reunite them, and sometimes you bring them back and reunite doesn't. So this is Hope for Wildlife. As of last year, it already doesn't look like this anymore. Probably. This is the 100-foot light cage there off in the lower right-hand corner that was being built for our raccoons. But the red building is our veterinary hospital, which I'll talk about in a bit. Big brown building is our main medical facility. The white building top right is our intensive care unit. So we have our own ICU. And it's kind of hard to see next to the ICU, but those are our outdoor isolation units. So we have 4 outdoor ICU units. for, there. Two. Yeah. And also behind these trees, as you can't see it, the Marine Animal Response Society just opened a lab up on our property that they'll share with us and let us to do necropsy. So we'll have necropsy ability. So now we'll have more of an opportunity to learn from the dead to save the living, as so puts it. Where right now we have to send our necropsies out and wait for somebody to do the singular results. They're just going to be right around the corner, so that's going to be awesome. What else can I point you on here? Lower right-hand corner is what it looked like about a year or so after we bought the place 27 years ago. So I was mentioning earlier, except for the few trees that are here, we planted every single tree off 700 property as a means to just provide protection and natural environment for the animals. Also to help some of the runoff from leaving the farmland there. Let's see, what else do I want to point to? Upper right-hand corner is the top of the bobcat unit, about as far away from everybody as we could possibly get. They're sequestered up there. Big area there on the right is an acre for the deer, and I'll show some other stuff on some other slides there. But then along the top kind of gives you a bit of our timeline. So the intensive care unit's only 4 years old. Time is going by. It's in Seaforth, so if you know where Lawrencetown Beach is, just outside of Dartmouth. We're about 5 minutes up the road now. Right on the trail, yeah. So this is where we're at in 2024. We do an average of 6,500 patients a year for wildlife. We do an average of 230, although this was a fun year because we're over 260 now. So that includes birds, reptiles, mammals, everything. So that's a lot of work because you got to figure them all out. 40,000 calls a year tells us is what our helpline gets. Obviously, not all of those are rescue calls, but a lot of it is educational along with what I've been talking about, how to coexist, interpreting animal behavior. One of the common ones we get that I think is fun in the springtime is, like you guys probably know that every once in a while the blue jay or cardinal just molt all of its head feathers at once and walk around bald from the neck up. Everybody assumes that's bird brain cancer. All in a panic. The beloved blue jay walking around. It's like, no, it's fine. So there's a lot of that sort of, though he's acting really weird running around in circles, like it's mating behavior. Yeah. But some of that is that, which is what we're there for. And then some of it is just helping people resolve what they would consider a conflict with animals in the air, which we would just call a coexistence problem. About 200 volunteers. We do have about 13 staff, so 4 permanent staff, what I call permanent staff. And then we have the ability, depending on what grants we get, to pay some of our interns and volunteers that are there to get work experience if they're students outside of school. 1 veterinary hospital. We have 4 certifications from the Nova Scotia Veterinary Association. We're pretty happy about that. On ICU, we have 3 remote veterinary clinics. You guys are all probably aware we got one in Deep Hollow, not far from here. We have one on the other side of the causeway in Cape Breton, and we have one in the South Shore. And we have long-term plans for a 4th that's probably going to go up north somewhere in the Victor region. Maybe we'll see what happens. And 85,000 patients in total is what we've done so far. So, and we're busier now than we've ever been. So this is our veterinary hospital. It's got everything you need to do veterinary hospital stuff. So we do have a digital x-ray, which we're really, really super happy about. And I know that seems weird, but when I started there, the x-ray machine we're using was still like the Marcus Welby one where you have to hold it up to the light to see the x-rays. So when we got the digital x-ray, Hope's like, I'm so excited about this. And she still tells everybody about it. But it's pretty hard to do what we do without that. A large portion of what we do is orthopedics, so bones, skeletal stuff. It's pretty common, especially stuff's hitting animals. Animals are getting stuff. Lots of stuff gets broken. This is an x-ray of a raccoon, an adolescent raccoon that got a ring from a milk jug stuck around his head. And he grew and the ring did not. Yeah. And eventually got found, but it had constricted his esophagus enough that he couldn't eat. And obviously we take x-rays before you remove everything so you know what's going on. It didn't scar tissue it up enough that he wasn't able to be released. So he actually was able to successfully be released. That's our hospital. I think the vet college and PEI. Used to be a good one. I assume it still is. Yeah. They do a lot of our lab work for us. The lab work we can't do on site. We send over there, or sometimes to the Canadian Wildlife WC. Now that I need to know the acronym, it went right out of my head. And then we also have a good relationship with the University of Guelph that has a veterinary university there, and they also have a wildlife rehabilitation veterinary program. So, not so much. They kind of do their own thing. I mean, they're a sister organization to us. I don't know whether we work, if they bring in animals, we bring in. There's no direct partnership or collaboration, or other than same as in PEI. There's just another rehab in PEI. So, although the rehab PEI just sent us a golden eagle, which was really awesome. But yeah, they treated it successfully. There wasn't really anything wrong with it, but they don't have a giant flight cage to put it in, so we got permission from both governments because it's very complicated getting animals across the border for some reason, just to bring it over so that it could just re-strengthen itself in our enclosure, which we'll show later. We do. We intern about 40 students from around the world every year. So we've had people from Turkey. I have somebody coming from the Netherlands, 2 people from the UK, somebody from New Jersey is going to be coming in the spring. So we have a full internship program as well. Rehab and veterinary. So it's a combination of both. So it'd be vet tech, vet assistants, and what we call rehabbers. Surgery, obviously. So we've got a full surgical suite, surgery and recovery room. Allows us to do whatever you do. This is that turtle. So he did have a broken lower jaw, so we're just wiring his lower jaw there together. And that's pretty nasty because while it heals, he can't eat. So we actually have to put a permanent feeding tube in. We'll have to feed him until his jaw heals enough so that he can be able to eat again. It's kind of a complicated process. The longest period we ever had a turtle recover, and turtles are really hardy. Hope will tell you it's pretty hard to kill a turtle, but they can come in pretty really rough shape. We had a snapper for 734 days before it was able to be released. Wow. They heal slow. I mean, the good part is their metabolism is really slow, so they can be really tough. But the downside is their metabolism is really slow, so it takes longer to heal than you might think. And our ICU. So we do have an intensive care unit, which is, I guess, where all the intensive care goes on. And sometimes it can just be for animals that they just need a little bit more quiet. Maybe they're more sensitive species. Maybe they do have something that you need eyes on a lot more. So a lot of that might be, maybe you've got your trauma case come in and you need eyes on it every 90 minutes or something like that, just to keep an eye on what's going on. So it's nice to have a dedicated building. So that's a little skunk. Yeah, he was hit by a car. So he had his little full body cast on. That was great. He kept chewing that off. We were rooting for him. And every time he did it, he's like, I want this thing on. And he just keep trying to walk around. We keep putting it back on. Then we put the cone of shame on him for a little while. But you can't put the hard ones on, right? Because they can't eat. So you put the floppy ones on. So they get quite clever. So what he would do to get is he would drag his head along the ground and fold it backwards and then gnaw on it. It's like, smart little guy. That's what you got to deal with. And this would be Fenton Farmhouse. This is the main medical facility. So nutrition is in there. You're going to see pictures up in the upper right-hand corner there of the things we feed animals. Eggs is a big thing that we go through about $4,000 a month in eggs, just the eggs. Wow. Springtime babies eat a lot. They grow super fast, so they do eat a lot. But nutrition is a big black art in and amongst itself because you have to feed the animal more or less what it eats in the wild. You can supplement a little bit with artificial stuff, but if you're bringing in an adult wild animal, for example, and you give it kibble and it's like, I have no idea what this is. This isn't what I eat. It starts kicking it around. On the other hand, if you're raising an animal, you want to try to feed it what it's going to find when you release it. So you can feed a raccoon canned cat food, but that's not going to do him much good when he gets released. So a lot of times what we do is we feed animals to other animals because that makes the nutrition easy, super easy. And then sometimes you don't really have a choice just because of the way the biology works. Barred owls, they eat the whole animal, right? The fur, bones, the shoes, the wallet, it all goes in. They don't digest all of it. They do get some nutrients from all of it, but they pack the rest of it as a pellet, right? They cast the pellet back up, usually before they eat. You know, it looks like a cat hawking up. You know, it's great when my owls do it, right in front of the kids. We had a gentleman find an owl once, many, many years ago in the woods, a little fledgling, and he assumed that it was, you know, abandoned. Maybe it was, probably not. Brought it home to care for it. And he was feeding Oliver. Oliver ended up being his name. He was feeding him raw chicken breast, which Oliver loves, but it didn't give him anything to cough up. So here's the fun thing. Millions of years of evolution, coughing something up has made that vomiting process, that casting process, part of their immune system. Because it sterilizes the esophagus, which is the main way they were going to get stuff in. So he ended up with a whole host of problems as he started to grow because he had a suppressed immune system. And it turned out, unbeknownst to the man, that he actually did have a broken wing. And the way he got there was the wing ended up getting infected because it was prone, even though he had him for like 2 months, I think, at that point. And Oliver ended up having to stay with us because we had to amputate the wing, and he lost an eye to a different disease that he had because he had, I mean, it was like not giving your kid the proper nutrition, the most vital part of their life. So a lot of what we do on a lot of those calls that we have is explain to people, it's like, I found a squirrel, how do I raise it? You probably shouldn't. And there's a lot of reasons why. So we feed animals, I guess. And then we have a bunch of specialized dedicated care rooms along the bottom. We have wet enclosures for animals that might need wet. It's the reptile room. We've got metal enclosures for animals that chew wood. We figured that out the hard way. These are our, the netted ones is our bird room. So back in the day, you used to open a door, had 5 chickadees in there. You had to try to get a towel or something in there because they'd all end up on the ceiling for some reason. Now we've got the snap enclosures where you just sort of undo 2 of the snaps and you reach under like you're in one of the zombie apocalypse movies. Like you don't have to actually open the door to do what you need to do in there. All of these are resizable. You can't really tell from the picture, but they have sliders, so we can make them different sizes. We have wet rooms for stuff that needs water, and just various rooms that have been. Outside, we got lots of stuff outside. I could never talk about all of it. We have aviaries. The middle there is our 100-foot flight cage. One end's 30 feet high that we usually put our birds of prey in, although it's multi-use as everything in Hope for Wildlife is. So if we need to live prey test some boxes or something, we put them in there and see whether they're able to do what they need to do. Our top right is our deer enclosure. We actually have 2 sides of the enclosure, a small part and a big part. They get about an acre to themselves and they stay sequestered. You see them being sequestered down here in the corner. So we got grass in there that we let grow super high. Part of what we do when you bring animals in captivity is they're not really happy about it, so you try to make it as comfortable as you can for them. In this period of their life, they're going to lay down in tall grass. That's their instinct. Mom leaves them alone and they lay down and they stay there until they hear her call and she comes back. If we actually mowed this, they would go anxious really quick. They'd be scared all the time. So you have to actually do this in order to be able to get them to be comfortable and adjust well, which means that they have to have that big field to themselves so they can hide. We have 3 marine units. These are 14 feet in diameter, 5.5 feet deep. Obviously, beavers, otters, stuff that needs water, ducks, geese, and then seabirds. And a lot of the seabirds, their feet, probably are so far back on their body, they don't really walk on land. And if you're going to put them in rehab for 3 or 4 weeks while something heals, they can't just walk around and rub all the feathers off their chest and injure them. So they need to be in water to rehab them. And then you just need water as part of the physio. So an ant, let's say, a duck hasn't flown for a while because it came in with a broken wing. 4 weeks to heal it, depends on what the break was. After 48 hours, the muscle atrophies. You can't just pick that bird up for 4 weeks and go, you're fly, because he just lands over there. So they need to re-strengthen everything. So paddling around, preening, flying that little bit of distance is pretty good for them. And then down in the corner is an example of what our enclosures look like these days. It usually freezes. And then one of the interns has to go with a hammer and an axe. It's all good fun. In general speaking, for the animals, a lot of the outdoor bowls are heated. So all of our enclosures have electricity run to them so that the bowls stay heated. It works down to about 5 degrees below zero, and there's not much you can do except just go and smash it and refill it every once in a while, which is what we have to do. But these are our new enclosures. So concrete pad sitting on this giant footing so that it stays level, and then it's got 1/4 inch mesh down to 1/4 inch from the ground. It keeps all the outside critters out. So let's have a happy story. I promise this has a happy ending. In February of this year, our helpline got a call about a bobcat stuck in a fence. And he had felt that it was not long for the world because it was barely struggling. And he didn't know how long it had been stuck there. This is the picture that he sent us when the call came in. So we went and we just put him in the crate, which is unusual for a bobcat. He's not sedated in this picture, even though he does look a little bit like he might be sedated. He's not. He's just extremely, extremely weak and docile. So we brought him in and we realized that the fence wasn't his problem. This snare was. He had got this snare around his abdomen and it had dug all the way down to the abdominal wall. And ironically, what saved his life was then subsequently getting stuck in this guy's fence, which didn't help things. So that's a bit of a challenge. 360 degrees right around the body. And we kind of pulled the skin together a little bit from this picture. It's actually a little more graphic than this. And it was an old injury. It was infected. It had debris in it. It wasn't fresh. So we had it for a while. And snares are not that uncommon, unfortunately. We get a lot of snares. And I think 100% of them have no ID on them. We don't even know how long that snare was. It could have been bad for 10 years. We really don't know. But he did get it around his abdomen, and it did quite a lot of damage. But fortunately, nothing to the muscle. It's mostly the layers of tissue. 4.5 hours of surgery on this bobcat. And it took multiple layers of stitches here, over 200 stitches to close this wound, both inside and out. And they are absorbable stitches because they are absorbable. So there he is with his cone of shame. So you might think, surgery. That's it. That's pretty good. We're done, right? No. Just like with anybody else, did he pull his stitches out? Is there an infection? How's he doing? You go ask him. So what that means is every time that you want to do a checkup on a wild animal like this, you have to sedate them. So it's a minor procedure every single time you want to examine this animal. So it's not a simple thing to do this. Stressful on them, stressful on us. But it does have to be done. So it's an involved process. Fortunately, he healed up rather quick. Probably on the younger side for a bobcat, so he did heal quickly. This is him being released in April. You can see the ring of new fur coming in. We got him out the door as soon as we possibly could because, again, being in captivity is a foreign environment. You don't want them there. It's stressful for them. That's not healthy. Also, the longer they're in captivity, the more chance they're going to get a little more used to you than we like. So getting them out the door as absolutely soon as possible is important. So we got him out as soon as we felt that there was enough healing done that we could get rid of him. So he's got this like little bit of baby fur coming back in there. We would not have released him in the fall like this because that is not enough fur to keep him. But where it was coming into spring and the temperature was fine, it's like, you're good. Go home. And so we sent him home. So that gives you kind of one example from beginning to end of how that works. It's kind of the same process with most of the animals that we have. Just going to wrap it up a little bit with the last couple of slides. We do have an education program. It wasn't the focus of this talk, but we do go to schools, workplaces, conferences. Obviously, a lot of you probably know we have a television show, which we just filmed in season 11. So it's they changed the name. I know it's scandalous. Hope for Wildlife, the Next Generation. That's actually the name of the show. I don't know what the difference between that and the other generation, but I don't market TV shows. Knowledge, probably. The production company hasn't told us yet where it's going to be airing. The only thing that John Wesley Chisholm told me was, he said worldwide, and then that was it. And I'm like, what does that mean? And that was it. Like that. So I don't. When I know you guys, I'll probably find out at the same time. And we do, if you come to Hope for Wildlife, we do have about 30 education animals on the property, like Frankie here, Buddy the Eagle. The bobcat you saw on the first slide's name is Jesse. We've just been approved to keep Jesse. So come and learn Jesse's story, but he's rather special. Last slide. There is a little bit of science that we do. There's a little bit of research that we do. Every wildlife rehab in the world is kind of on the front lines. So things like the avian flu, the high pathogen one, well, it came to us first. We were the ones that found that it was in the province when it came in. That's not that unusual because you kind of do a random sampling 7,000 animals a year from the environment. So when stuff goes wrong, it's usually coming to us. But that's pretty common for a lot of rehabs, particularly in emerging nations where there's much tighter reliance on citizen science because you don't have the money to do a whole lot of research. So there's a lot more. That's a lot more common. We did find skunk adenovirus in North America porcupines when they told us that wasn't possible, and we said we're pretty sure it is. And they said no, it's not. And then they wrote this paper and said, yes, it is. That was fun. But we've had a number of other DAOs come and done a couple studies there on some stuff. We've had some behavioral studies and kids done with animals, and so that's always fun. Never as much of this as we would like, but this is always on the horizon. So that's it. That's the talk. So anyway, thank you, everybody.